The clinking of champagne glasses and the low hum of self-congratulatory chatter died the second I spoke. My stepmother, Laura, was on a small stage, delivering a gushing toast to family, legacy, and unwavering commitment in front of a giant portrait of my late father. The irony was so thick, I could taste it. "He's a married man, Laura," I said, my voice shaking but carrying with crystalline clarity across the suddenly silent ballroom. Her perfectly painted crimson smile froze, then began to crumble. "Mia, darling," she whispered into the microphone, her voice a pathetic crackle that amplified her shock. "What on earth are you talking about? You're not well." My heart hammered against my ribs. A collective gasp sucked the air from the room, and a waiter's dropped tray shattered the silence like a gunshot. I took a step forward. "I'm talking about Michael," I pressed on, my voice getting stronger. "The one you were on the phone with an hour ago. The one you've been meeting at the hotel. The one whose wife, Sarah, has no idea her husband is sleeping with my father's widow." Panic flashed in Laura's eyes, raw and unguarded. The proud, smug matriarch was gone, replaced by a cornered animal as whispers erupted around us. Her father just died. Is she serious? Laura's perfect family reunion had just become the most exclusive train wreck in town, and I was the one holding the match. For a single, thrilling moment, I felt a surge of righteous power. But as I watched her carefully constructed world implode, as her face crumpled into a mask of pure horror and humiliation, a colder, heavier feeling began to settle in my stomach. What had I just done? But to fully understand why this happened, let's rewind to the beginning. To understand why I, an 18-year-old girl, would detonate a bomb in the middle of my own family, you have to understand the war that had been raging just beneath the surface for years. My world ended on a Tuesday. It wasn't dramatic, like in the movies. There was no screech of tires or shocking phone call in the middle of the night. It was quiet. A doctor with kind, tired eyes sat my mom and me down in a sterile-smelling office and explained that the tumor in my dad's brain, the one they thought they'd beaten, was back. And this time, it wasn't going to leave. He was gone 6 months later. My dad, Mark, was my anchor. He was the one who taught me how to ride a bike, how to skip stones, and how to spot the constellations in the night sky. He had a laugh that could fill a room and a hug that could piece back together even the most shattered parts of your heart. When he was gone, the silence he left behind was deafening. My mom, Emma, was my hero. She and my dad had divorced when I was 12. It was amicable, as far as divorces go, but it split our lives in two. While my dad was a successful architect with a comfortable income, my mom was a freelance artist. She created beautiful, intricate illustrations for children's books. But freelance was just a pretty word for financially precarious. She was warm, loving, and fiercely creative, but she was always counting pennies. Our apartment was small, a little cluttered with canvases and paint tubes, but it was filled with love. After the divorce, things got tighter. She took on extra commission work, sometimes working late into the night, the soft scratch of her pencils a constant soundtrack to my evenings. She never once complained. Her love for me was a fierce, protective flame that no amount of financial hardship could ever dim. Then came Laura. She appeared less than a year after the divorce, a whirlwind of expensive perfume, sharp business suits, and blindingly white teeth. She was a corporate lawyer, my dad's opposite in every conceivable way. Where he was warm and sentimental, she was cool and pragmatic. Where our home with Mom was a cozy, creative chaos, Laura's apartment, and later the house she shared with my dad, was a minimalist marvel of glass and chrome that felt more like a museum than a home. She married my dad just 8 months after they met. I was the flower girl, a resentful 13-year-old in a scratchy taffeta dress. I remember watching her at the altar, looking at my dad with an expression of triumphant ownership. It wasn't love, it was an acquisition. Laura wasn't overtly cruel at first. She was worse. She was dismissive. She treated me like a curious piece of furniture that came with the house. She'd ask about my day with a polite, vacant smile, her eyes already scanning the room for something more interesting. She made little digs, veiled insults wrapped in the guise of helpful advice. "Oh, Mia, your mother lets you wear that? It's artistic." Or, "It must be so challenging for your mom, not having the stability your father can provide." She drove a wedge between my dad and me, subtly at first. Our weekends together, which used to be our sacred time, were now filled with Laura's social obligations, charity galas, dinner parties with her stuffy colleagues, and trips to art galleries where everyone spoke in hushed, reverent tones. My dad, ever the peacemaker, would try to bridge the gap. "Give her a chance, Mia Bear," he'd say. "She's just different from your mom." But I saw the way he changed, too. He seemed less present, more worried about keeping Laura happy. The light in his eyes, the one that used to shine just for me and my mom, seemed to dim a little each year. The real tension, the simmering resentment that would eventually boil over, was always about my mom. Laura saw Emma as a rival she had already vanquished, yet she couldn't stop competing. She'd buy me extravagant gifts, a new laptop, a designer handbag, things she knew my mom could never afford. It wasn't generosity, it was a power play. It was her way of saying, "See what he gives me? See what he can give you when you're with me?" When my dad got sick, Laura's true colors bled through the carefully applied layers of her perfect wife persona. She became the gatekeeper. She'd schedule his treatments, manage his visitors, and answer his phone, always with an air of martyred efficiency. She treated my mom like an unwanted pest. When Mom would call, Laura would be brusque. "He's resting. It's not a good time." She made my mom feel like an outsider in the life of the man she had once loved, the father of her child. The day he died, we were all at the hospital. Mom was holding his left hand, and I was holding his right. Laura stood at the foot of the bed, her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. When the heart monitor flatlined, my mom and I broke down, our grief a raw, physical thing. Laura just stood there for a moment, and then she walked over and placed a cool hand on my shoulder. "He's at peace now," she said, her voice devoid of any real emotion. It felt like she was closing a business deal. In the months that followed, my grief was a heavy cloak I couldn't take off. And through it all, Laura was a constant, irritating presence. She was the executor of the will, the grieving widow, the one who took charge. She planned a funeral that felt more like a corporate networking event and talked endlessly about my dad's legacy. But she never talked about him. Not the man who loved bad science fiction movies and made the best pancakes on Sundays. She talked about his assets, his portfolio, his reputation. She was mourning the loss of a status symbol, not a husband. My hatred for her wasn't a loud, fiery thing. It was a cold, hard stone in the pit of my stomach. A stone that got a little heavier with every condescending remark, every pitying glance, every subtle reminder that in her world, my mother and I were less than nothing. The invitation to the Powell family legacy reunion arrived 6 months after my dad's funeral. It was printed on thick, cream-colored cardstock with embossed gold lettering. Powell was Laura's maiden name, and this event was entirely her creation. It was to be held at the Oak Haven Country Club, a place so exclusive I didn't even know it existed. The invitation stated, in elegant script, that it was a celebration of 3 generations of Powell excellence. It was a monument to her own ego, and she was using my dad's memory as part of the foundation. My first instinct was to throw it in the trash. "I'm not going," I told my mom, tossing it onto our small kitchen table. Mom picked it up, her fingers tracing the gold letters. "Mia, honey, I know it's hard. But your stepbrother Lucas will be there. He'd love to see you." She was right. Lucas was the one good thing to come out of my dad's marriage to Laura. He was 2 years older than me, Laura's son from her first marriage. Unlike his mother, Lucas was kind, down to earth, and had a genuine warmth about him. He treated me like a real sister from day one, often acting as a buffer between me and his mother's passive aggression. During my dad's illness, he was a constant source of support, bringing me coffee at the hospital and just sitting with me in silence when I didn't want to talk. "I don't know, Mom," I sighed. "I can't stand being around her. She'll just be Laura." "Then you go for you," Mom said, her voice gentle but firm. "You go and you hold your head high. You are Mark's daughter. You have every right to be there. Don't let her make you feel small." And so I went. The country club was even more ostentatious than I had imagined. A long, winding driveway led up to a sprawling white building that looked like a modern plantation house. Valets in crisp red jackets hurried to open car doors. Inside, the ballroom was a sea of crystal, white linens, and enormous floral arrangements that probably cost more than our monthly rent. A string quartet played softly in the corner, and waiters weaved through the crowd with trays of champagne and impossibly tiny appetizers. It was a performance, and Laura was the star. She glided through the room in a sapphire blue dress that clung to her toned frame, her laughter tinkling as she greeted her relatives, a collection of severe-looking people with names like Muffy and Chadwick. She looked every bit the grieving but resilient widow, the gracious hostess, the pillar of her perfect family. I felt like a bug under a microscope. My dress, a simple black one that my mom and I had found on a clearance rack, felt drab and cheap next to the designer labels all around me. I clutched a glass of sparkling water, trying my best to look like I belonged. "Hey, stranger." I turned to see Lucas standing beside me, a welcome sight in this sea of strangers. He looked handsome in his suit, but his eyes held the same weary expression I often saw in the mirror. "Hey," I said, a genuine smile finally reaching my face. "Thanks for the warning. I would have worn my tiara if I'd known it was this fancy." He chuckled, a low, easy sound. "Yeah, Mom went a little overboard. She's been planning this thing for months. It's a lot." He gestured vaguely at the opulent room. "How are you holding up?" "I'm okay," I lied. "It's just weird, seeing her like this, acting like the perfect hostess when Dad—" My voice trailed off. "I know," he said, his expression turning serious. "It's hard for me to watch, too. She grieves in her own way, I guess, by, throwing a party." His attempt at a joke fell flat, and we stood in silence for a moment, the unspoken truth of his mother's nature hanging between us. "Your Aunt Carol is staring at me like I just tracked mud on her priceless Persian rug," I whispered, nodding towards a woman with a severe blonde bob and a face that looked like it had been chiseled from ice. Lucas followed my gaze. "Oh, that's just her face. She looks like that when she's happy. Don't worry about them. I'm glad you're here, Mia." His kindness was a small island of comfort in an ocean of pretension. We spent the next hour together, pointing out the most ridiculous outfits and making up backstories for Laura's stuffy relatives. For a little while, I almost forgot why I was dreading this so much. I almost managed to relax, but Laura would never allow that. The tipping point, the moment the cold stone in my stomach began to heat up, happened near the grand portrait of my father. It was a huge, professionally shot photo, one of the last ones taken before he got sick. He looked handsome and vital, his eyes crinkling at the corners in that way they always did when he smiled. Laura had positioned it at the front of the room, right next to the stage, like a prop in her carefully staged play. She had gathered a small audience, her sister, a few cousins, and the formidable Aunt Carol. They were sipping wine, and Laura was holding court. I was trying to slip by unnoticed to get to the restroom when I heard her voice, sharp and carrying, cut through the din. "It's just such a shame," Laura was saying, dabbing at a non-existent tear with the corner of a silk handkerchief. "Mark was always so generous, but Emma, well, artists, so wonderful with their creativity, but so hopeless with practical matters. I worry about Mia constantly." I froze, hiding behind a ridiculously large potted fern. My blood ran cold. Aunt Carol sniffed disdainfully. "Well, you can't expect much else. That's the sort of environment she was raised in. It's a miracle the girl is as presentable as she is." "I do my best," Laura said with a sigh of theatrical modesty. "I try to be a positive influence, to show her what a stable, supportive family looks like. Mark wanted me to look after her, and I take that responsibility very seriously. But honestly, her mother makes it so difficult. She fills Mia's head with such bohemian nonsense. And she's always struggling. It's embarrassing, frankly. I've offered to help, of course, but she has too much pride." Her sister, a softer version of Laura, chimed in. "You're a saint, Laura, truly. To take on his daughter after everything. Most women wouldn't. She's not a burden, Laura said, her voice dripping with false magnanimity. She's a project, a chance to give her the opportunities her own mother never could. The words hit me like physical blows. Humiliation, hot and prickly, washed over me. They were talking about my mom, my wonderful, hard-working, loving mom, as if she were a pathetic charity case. They were dissecting our lives, our struggles, and turning them into a cheap narrative to make Laura look like a savior. The love in our little apartment, the sacrifices my mom made every single day, they had twisted it all into something pitiful and embarrassing. I felt a desperate need to defend her. I stepped out from behind the fern, my hands clenched into fists at my sides. "That's not true," I said, my voice barely a whisper. 4 pairs of perfectly made-up eyes turned to me. Laura's smile didn't falter. "Mia, darling, we were just talking about you." "I heard you," I said, my voice growing stronger. "You're wrong. My mom is a great mom. She's not a project, and we don't need your help." Laura's expression hardened, the faux sympathy evaporating in an instant. She let out a short, condescending laugh. "Oh, sweetie, you're so young. You don't understand these things. I'm not insulting your mother. I'm just stating facts. It's a fact that she struggles financially. It's a fact that I can provide you with a better life." "A better life?" I shot back, my voice rising. "Like this? A party where everyone judges each other based on their bank accounts? My mom taught me about love and kindness." "What are you teaching me? How to be fake?" Aunt Carol gasped, clutching her pearls. "Well, I never. The nerve of this child." Laura's face was a mask of cold fury. She took a step closer, lowering her voice to a venomous hiss. "You are a guest in my family's home, young lady. You will not speak to me that way. Your mother's love and kindness doesn't pay the bills, does it? Perhaps if she had made better life choices, you wouldn't be so defensive. Now, I suggest you go and compose yourself before you embarrass yourself, and my husband's memory, any further." Her words were a slap in the face. Hot tears pricked my eyes, blurring the faces of the smug, judgmental women in front of me. I turned and fled, pushing my way through the crowd, ignoring Lucas as he called my name. I didn't stop until I found a deserted hallway near the back of the club, leading to the staff areas. I collapsed onto a velvet bench, the dam of my composure finally breaking. The tears came, hot and furious. Tears of humiliation, of anger, of a deep, aching grief for my dad, who never would have allowed anyone to speak about my mom that way. Laura hadn't just insulted my mother. She had desecrated my father's memory, using it as a weapon to elevate herself and belittle us. The cold stone of hatred in my stomach was now a raging inferno. I sat there, consumed by a feeling of utter powerlessness, wishing there was something, anything I could do to wipe that smug, hypocritical smirk off her face. And then, as if on cue, the universe handed me a loaded gun. I must have been in that hallway for 10 minutes, trying to pull myself together, when I heard footsteps clicking on the polished marble floor. I quickly wiped my eyes, hoping to go unnoticed. It was Laura. She hadn't seen me, tucked away in the dimly lit alcove. She walked past, her phone pressed to her ear, her voice a low, urgent murmur. She stopped a few feet away, her back to me, clearly thinking she was alone. I know, I miss you too," she purred into the phone. Her voice was completely different from the one she used with her family or me. It was husky, intimate, and sickeningly sweet. My curiosity piqued. I stayed silent, hidden in the shadows. "This party is such a bore," she continued with a sigh. "Just a bunch of my ancient relatives. I can't wait for it to be over." "No, of course I can't leave now. I'm the guest of honor, remember?" She laughed, a low, throaty sound. The grieving widow holding everything together. It's exhausting being this perfect. My breath caught in my throat. "Listen, about Thursday," she said, her voice dropping even lower. "I can't do the gallery. Things are complicated. Mia is here. Mark's daughter. She's been acting out. I think she's getting suspicious." "Mia? Suspicious about what?" "Let's just meet at the hotel instead. The usual room. It's safer," Laura whispered. There was a pause. I know it's not as romantic as our little hideaway, but it's better than nothing. Don't worry about Sarah. She's clueless, as always. She thinks you're at a conference in Chicago next week. My world tilted on its axis. Sarah? Hotel? The usual room? I love you too, Michael, she breathed into the phone. Now I have to go. I have to get back out there and play the part. Be strong for the family. She made a kissing sound and then hung up. I sat there frozen on the velvet bench, the conversation replaying in my mind. Michael. A married man named Michael. A wife named Sarah who thinks he's in Chicago. A secret meeting at a hotel. It was all there. A sordid, undeniable affair. Laura, the woman who had just lectured me on family values, who built her entire identity around being the perfect, committed wife to my father, who was currently hosting a party celebrating her family's legacy in front of a giant portrait of her dead husband, was cheating. She had been cheating. The hypocrisy was so staggering it left me breathless. All her condescension, all her judgment towards my mother, all her posturing as a pillar of moral fortitude, it was all a lie. A massive, elaborate, sickening lie. The grief and humiliation I had felt just moments before curdled into something else entirely. A cold, hard rage, a righteous fury. She had the audacity to belittle my mother's struggles while she was sneaking around, betraying the very memory of the man who had given her everything. A war started inside me. One part of me, the part that still heard my dad's voice telling me to be the bigger person, knew this was a secret that could destroy lives. Michael's wife, Sarah, Lucas, Laura's own parents. The fallout would be immense. But another, louder part of me, the part that was tired of being made to feel small, the part that loved my mother with a fierceness that could move mountains, screamed for justice. Or maybe it was just revenge. At that moment, I wasn't sure I could tell the difference. All I could see was Laura's smug face as she called my mom embarrassing. All I could hear was her condescending tone as she called me a project. She had humiliated me and my mother publicly, in front of her entire family. She had used her power and position to kick us when we were already down. She wanted to talk about a lack of morals? She wanted to put on a show of perfection? Fine, I would be the one to pull back the curtain. I stood up, my legs feeling strangely steady. The tears were gone, replaced by an icy resolve. I walked back towards the ballroom, my purpose clear. I wasn't just going to wipe the smirk off her face. I was going to shatter the entire flawless mask. I re-entered the ballroom as Laura was stepping onto the stage, a champagne flute in hand. The string quartet had fallen silent. It was time for the main event, Laura's tribute to her family and her late, beloved husband. The timing was almost poetic. She tapped the microphone, the sharp sound echoing through the room, calling for attention. A hush fell over the crowd. She beamed, that perfect, practiced smile firmly back in place. Lucas was standing near the front, watching her with a complicated expression of familial duty and what I now recognized as deep-seated weariness. "Thank you all so much for coming," Laura began, her voice smooth as silk. "It means the world to me to have my family here, my rock, as we celebrate the Powell legacy. A legacy of strength, integrity, and above all, commitment." She raised her glass towards my father's portrait. "And of course, to my darling Mark. He isn't with us tonight, but his spirit is everywhere. He was a man of profound honor and loyalty. Our marriage was built on a foundation of trust and devotion, a foundation I will cherish and uphold for the rest of my life." The hypocrisy was so thick I felt like I was choking on it. This was it. This was the moment. I started walking towards the stage, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I could feel Lucas's eyes on me, a question in them. I ignored him. My focus was entirely on Laura. As she paused for a dramatic sip of her champagne, basking in the respectful silence of the room, I reached the foot of the small stage. "What about Michael?" I asked. My voice wasn't a shout, but it cut through the silence, like a knife. Laura's head snapped towards me. The smile flickered. "Mia? What did you say?" I took a deep breath, the adrenaline surging. "I asked, what about Michael?" I repeated, my voice louder this time, infused with a cold fury. Is he part of the legacy of integrity and commitment you're talking about? And that's when it happened, the moment everything shattered. He's a married man, Laura, I said, my voice trembling but clear. The murmurs began, a ripple of confusion spreading through the crowd. Laura's face went white. Mia, darling, she hissed into the microphone, the sound unnaturally loud. What on earth are you talking about? You're not well. The grief. Don't you dare talk about grief, I shot back, stepping closer. I'm talking about the man you're having an affair with. The man you're meeting at a hotel because the art gallery is too risky now that I'm acting out. A collective gasp went through the room. A glass shattered somewhere in the back. The silence that followed was absolute, heavy, and suffocating. Every eye was on us. Laura's parents, in the front row, looked utterly horrified, their faces turning a pasty gray. I'm talking about Michael, I pressed on, my voice ringing with a conviction I didn't know I possessed. The one you were on the phone with not 20 minutes ago. The one you told I love you to while standing in front of a picture of my dead father. The one whose wife, Sarah, has no idea her husband is sleeping with the woman who just gave a speech about trust and devotion. The carefully constructed world of Laura Powell crumbled into dust. The panic in her eyes was wild. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. She looked at me, then at her parents, then at Lucas, whose face was a storm of confusion, hurt, and dawning horror. He looked from me to his mother, a silent question in his eyes, a question she couldn't answer. Chaos erupted. The whispers exploded into outright chatter. Aunt Carol looked like she might actually faint. Laura's father, a stoic-looking man I'd never heard speak more than 3 words, was on his feet, his face purple with rage. What is the meaning of this? Laura! Laura just stood there, exposed and humiliated under the bright lights of the stage, the microphone hanging uselessly in her hand. The perfect facade was gone, and what was left was ugly and pathetic. She looked at me, her eyes filled not with anger, but with a surprising amount of hatred. It was the look of someone who had been utterly and completely defeated. And, in that moment, the thrill of victory I had anticipated felt hollow. All I felt was the vast, echoing emptiness of the destruction I had caused. The immediate aftermath was a blur of angry shouts and frantic whispers. Laura's father stormed the stage, grabbing her by the arm and pulling her away, hissing words I couldn't hear. Her mother was crying, being consoled by a stunned-looking Aunt Carol. The party was over. Guests were fleeing as if the building were on fire, desperate to escape the scene but also buzzing with the scandal they had just witnessed. I stood there, rooted to the spot, as the perfect family reunion imploded around me. I felt a hand on my arm and flinched, turning to see Lucas. His face was pale, his eyes wide with shock and a deep, bottomless hurt. Mia, is it true? He asked, his voice barely audible over the din. I could only nod, the lump in my throat too big to speak. He stared at me, his expression unreadable. I expected him to scream at me, to call me a liar, to defend his mother. But he didn't. He just looked, broken. I knew something was off, he whispered, more to himself than to me. She's been so distant, on her phone all the time. He looked over at the chaotic scene of his family melting down. But this, I can't believe this. Lucas, I'm so sorry, I stammered, the apology feeling weak and inadequate. He shook his head, not in denial, but in a kind of dazed confusion. Why, Mia? Why like this? She insulted my mom, I said, the justification sounding childish even to my own ears. She said horrible things. She humiliated me. I was so angry, I wanted to hurt her, the way she hurt me. Lucas looked at me, and for the first time I saw a flicker of something other than shock in his eyes. It wasn't anger. It was a profound sadness. My mom, she can be cruel, he admitted, his voice cracking. She pushes people. She always has. But this is going to destroy everything. He wasn't just talking about Laura. He was talking about his grandparents, about Sarah, about himself. The weight of my actions crashed down on me with the force of a physical blow. I hadn't just exposed a cheater, I had dropped a bomb on an entire family, his family. And he was standing in the middle of the wreckage, looking at me. "I need to go," I mumbled, turning to leave. I couldn't stand to see the pain in his eyes, pain that I had put there. "Mia," he called after me. I stopped but didn't turn around. "For what it's worth, I get why you were angry. I wish you hadn't." His words followed me out of the ballroom, through the lobby now filled with scandalized guests, and out into the cool night air. I didn't wait for a valet. I just ran. The drive home was a long, silent blur. I walked into our small apartment, the familiar smell of turpentine and my mom's lavender tea a stark contrast to the sterile opulence of the country club. The adrenaline was gone, leaving behind a bone-deep exhaustion and a nauseating mix of guilt and shame. My mom was sitting at the kitchen table sketching on a pad. She looked up when I came in, her face etched with concern. "Mia, you're back early. How was it? Are you okay? You look pale." I collapsed into a chair opposite her and the whole story just poured out of me. The reunion, Lucas, the insults about her, the overheard phone call, and the terrible public confrontation. I told her everything, my voice thick with unshed tears. When I was done, a heavy silence filled our small kitchen. Mom just looked at me, her expression unreadable. I braced myself for a lecture, for disappointment, for her to tell me I had gone too far. Instead, she reached across the table and took my hands in hers. Her hands were warm, calloused from years of work, and in that moment, they were the only thing holding me together. "Oh, honey," she said softly, her voice filled with a deep, aching empathy. "That woman said those things about you? About us?" I nodded, fresh tears welling in my eyes. "She called me a project. She said you were embarrassing." A flash of anger, fierce and protective, crossed my mother's face. It was the anger of a lioness defending her cub. "No one," she said, her voice low and firm, "gets to talk about my daughter that way. No one." She squeezed my hands. "I understand why you were so hurt and angry, Mia. What Laura did, what she said, it was cruel and indefensible. Your feelings are completely valid. You had every right to be furious." "But I ruined everything, Mom," I whispered, my voice breaking. "I saw Lucas's face. I destroyed his family." She sighed, her expression softening into one of profound sadness. "What Laura did with her affair. She's the one who broke her family, Mia, not you. You just turned on the lights in a room that was already dark." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "But the way you did it, in front of everyone, that was born from your pain. And when we act from a place of pure pain and vengeance, we can cause a lot of collateral damage. It doesn't make what she did right, and it doesn't make your hurt any less real, but it makes everything messy." She was right. It wasn't a simple case of good versus evil. It was a tangled, ugly mess of hurt feelings and terrible choices, and I was right in the middle of it. Was my action justified because Laura was a hypocrite who had hurt me? Or was it just a malicious act of revenge that hurt innocent people like Lucas in the process? "I don't know if I did the right thing," I confessed, the doubt eating away at me. "Half of me feels like she got what she deserved, but the other half feels like I'm a monster." My mom looked at me with all the love in the world. "You're not a monster. You're an 18-year-old girl who just lost her father and has been dealing with a difficult stepmother for years. You were wounded, and you lashed out. It's human." She gently wiped a tear from my cheek. "But the question you're asking yourself now, whether it was right or wrong, that's a question you're going to have to live with for a while." We sat there in silence for a long time. The moral ambiguity of it all was suffocating. I needed an outside perspective. I needed to know what other people with no connection to me or Laura or my family, thought. Later that night, long after my mom had gone to bed, I opened my laptop. The screen cast a blue glow in my dark room. My fingers hovered over the keyboard for a moment, and then I began to type. I opened up Reddit, navigated to the Am I the A-hole forum, and started writing. I poured out the entire story, every last detail, changing names and minor details to protect our identities. I needed to know. I needed to hand this story over to the anonymous judgment of the internet and ask the question that was echoing in my own soul. AITA, for exposing my stepmother's affair at her perfect family reunion after she insulted my mom?